not a campaign. And because, I think I mentioned this earlier, but people say that, and then, what do you have? You have another campaign, another campaign. And so, anyway, that was June of 2015, and he committed to me that yes, and, I told him, well, I'm going to stick with that all through this, so you'll make it tired of me. And he said, well, I'm already tired of you, but that's... So anyway, now it's June of 2016, and it's clear Clinton's going to win, and, part of it was the superdelegates, when we talk about a big rig. And that's still like too much in my head, getting rid of the superdelegates. They're really unelected delegates. I don't know why I just used the word super without biting my tongue for doing that. And so this,
what there really is lobbyists.
Yeah, half of them are actually. Some of them are electeds, to be fair, and some of them there are a few union people. That's how I ended up in the DNC. But yeah, I'd say half of them are directly connected to that system, either as a lobbyist or profiting from it. But put that aside. So now it's June of 2016. And so, a number of us are saying, okay, how are we going to keep these groups going? And it's out of that, and plus we were going to inherit the campaign list. This is the people who volunteered for Bernie everywhere, right? That's not really the list we're using now as much, but it came from there originally. And so, eventually he focused on that. That did take a while. And so now it's August of 2016. And, there's a big debate, internal stuff, you could read about it, about this notion, which is a membership-based organization versus a political action committee. And so obviously I was on this side of fighting that fight. And a lot of other people, even to this day, are more committed to a different notion of this political action committee structure. But anyway, this is, I think, important because those of you who are building groups, that is not the tradition in American politics and not well understood. And so it's not so much just the legalities of that. A lot of people could explain the legal structure, but it's much more about groups that are mostly autonomous and mostly come up with their own way of doing it. But as you heard all day today here, networked. So the idea is, how in Illinois do we network without a bunch of rules and bureaucracy of our own, which has also plagued progressive organizations forever. You develop your own bureaucracy and your own rules, and then, people looking for positional power. We don't really support that notion. We really support the notion that your power comes from organizing. If that's just a chant, what have we done? How are we changing things? And so if the power really comes from organizing, it comes back to this thing, that I mentioned, some version of what I mentioned earlier. That means we're asking people to join, right? And that we're asking other people to ask people to join. It's really just those two things in a systematic, structured way. And we're learning from those two-way conversations. And our groups are getting bigger, so we call it growing good groups. So anyway, the history of it comes from that. And, lots of groups, but again, this is, total transparency and honesty. The majority are not growing groups. And that's okay. And, we don't go back to people and say, your group's not growing. We say, hey, the groups that are growing, that's where, the limited resources that we all have, we're going to throw in with them, whatever they're doing. So the growing of the groups is really key. This is an organizing section, and it sounds trite or whatever the right word is, but we really have to think through, how do we engage with people to grow our group, number one, and number two, then, to get people to volunteer. Not too much, by the way. I mean, it's something I learned in the union. Our union is based on active shop stewards, 50,000 stewards. They're not paid. And that's how me and, most people started in some way. Well, how do you sustain them? You don't burn them out. You sort of cherish them, these volunteers in your groups. And you make it fun. People in the union used to, almost ridicule me because I'd say, well, this has to be fun. They'd say, Larry, how much fun are you? I said, well, I think I'm pretty funny, so. Funnier than Bernie. No, that's another story. Here's Bernie right here. He's already, So anyway, I don't think this thing is that simple about how you grow these groups and how you keep them going and how you negotiate this sort of three-way thing. I call the triangle of here's the issues that will get people in. They want to work on issue campaigns. Well, then how do we connect those to electoral politics? Because that's not always fun, particularly for candidates. There's a lot of pain in those, even if you win. And then, how do we build this political structure with allies? Like Sunrise was here, there you are, Miranda, and 350 was here. And, we have allies. We're not looking to be the only group in town, right? In some cases that's fine, but I'm just saying that's not the strategy. And so that's the third side, right? Building either transforming the Democratic Party or building something that looks like a party so that we have an ongoing organization so that the candidates who do win are held accountable on the issues because we have a continuing organization. So those three sides are connected. They're not separate three things. And I probably used up my minutes, but let me just say one more thing that I probably wasn't supposed to get into. We mentioned this earlier, Joseph in the opening, me after the fact. This 30,000 thing is a really big organizing tool you have. And so, we really should figure out, Richard and others, how we're going to systematically get the groups here to get volunteers to make those calls to build your own groups, because we have to divide up the 30,000 based on the zip codes in your area. It's not hard to do, that takes. But then get the volunteers to call those people, not just to say vote for, all these great candidates, including Bernie, on March 17th, but also to join the group, right? These are the people that, if they're in that list, they're not just from the Bernie list before. They're from people who are opening emails, signing petitions. A lot of them are donors. And so that's how you build, that's like what we call low-hanging fruit. If there was an apple tree, you wouldn't need a ladder. So I think collectively, sorting out, especially now, because we have this primary March 17th, how are we going to collectively cover those 30,000, meaning not a robocall, not an email's fine to say, hey, we're going to be calling, but not an email, not a text message. Those are all fine, but those are sort of tricky things. No, this is like actually talking to the person, radical idea. And ideally more than once, saying, hey, we live in the same county. It's great that you've been a supporter, and we want to figure out how we can collaborate together to build our group. So anyway, Mike, that was probably more than I was supposed to do. But, for me, again, just personal, it only matters to me. I've been in this thing a long time, old at this point. To me, the whole thing is about these groups. It's not really about the candidates. You can probably tell that. And I do love Bernie in a certain way. I mean, he's grumpy, but I do. And I guess it's an honor to know him as well as I know him. But it's about the groups. If I'm going to have any hope that, what my life was mostly about was that working class people could have an organization at work. Imagine that, a radical idea. And actually say to the boss, we're going to have a say too. Just that one thing, or if it's climate change, my two daughters, or Medicare for all, which I spend probably more time now on than any issue. We don't have a hope for that without groups, not just our groups, but good groups that are growing, and where we live, that we actually believe that when we elect people where we live, we can be happier there. This is not some perennial foot race. It's not some sports team. And that's really what the media does to our elections. Especially this presidential thing. It's all about this individual and this one and this one and this one. It's really got to be about our happiness. And in countries much tougher than this one around the world, people have organized locally, believing they can actually build power there and network in their own nation and change it. And there are lots of setbacks along the way, whether it's South Africa and the apartheid fight, or people I know in Argentina who just got the government back. But it really does come down to some kind of sustainable organizing with groups. You could call it a union at work, but you could call it our revolution in the community, or Sunrise with students, but sustainable. And to really think about that, not only today, but if we're driving home or taking the subway or whatever, how can we do that in our own way, in our own group? And then this complicated thing a little bit, how do we network so that in different ways, whether it's conference calls, we're famous for those. Joseph's on fucking conference calls every day. I shouldn't have said fucking, but I did. I'm going to end there.
So Revolution is headed to Detroit tonight, and we're going to drive through an ice storm and get to Detroit. We're doing the same movement in Michigan as we are in Illinois and across the country. And as Larry said, this is about building and growing really good local groups. And tonight, we wanted to kind of create an exercise. Who here is who's downstate, south of I-80? Woo! I'm south of I-80 on the Indiana side of the cornfield. So if you're south of I-80, or where else can we gather some folks together? Rockford.
Yeah.
Rockford, and then McHenry County. Where can we have folks together? Can we all form one group together today to talk about what we're going to do to organize our communities? So we want to kind of split up. What about Chicago? How many Chicago folks is off the room?
Yeah, why don't we start with Chicago?
Yeah, so Chicago. So Chicago is up here in the front.
So everyone's going to almost stand
If
up.
you're in the rural part of the state, or McHenry and south of the Collar County,